you really want to make content that you can still run as an ad, right? The underlying intention is that you're still kind of promoting something. Generally, in this instance, it would be like a song, but you want to make the content in a way that it feels like, imagine just going on to like your explore feed, right? Or like scrolling on TikTok, and the content that just pops up and it feels so organic and native to the platform that you don't realize you're being advertised to.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Headliner Mindset Podcast. Today's guest spent many years of his life as an artist, playing guitar and touring in metal bands before going on to become a creative director and working with major brands like Adidas and Jack Daniels. Now he runs a digital marketing agency that helps record labels and artists execute strategic campaigns to get their music out to the masses, grow their social media, sell tickets, sell merch, and much, much more. This is Aaron George from Good Things Social.
I appreciate that. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man. Dude, thank you for being here. It's so cool to have you. I'm so excited to just crack open your skull and pick your brain because you know a lot about marketing, specifically marketing music, which is what we're here to talk about. And I would really love to start off by hearing a bit about your story, because this is actually how we connected personally in the first place. Was we met at a party here in Austin, and we're both metalheads. And so we were like BFFs at first sight. So let's start there. As far as your background as a musician, tell me about like what you did in the metal world. I'm so curious.
Yeah. I mean, the metal part is so foundational because my mom was listening to metal before I was even born, right? So like late 70s through the 80s, 90s. She just so happened to be friends with Roxanne Robinson, who is the sister of Ross Robinson. Ross Robinson's the metal producer who basically every new metal band ever, right? Korn and Slipknot, and all these dudes worked with him.
Yeah, huge.
So, I mean, I remember getting like these little demo cassette tapes that he would give us, you know, through his sister, and we would have them. And so metal's just been a part of my life, literally my whole life. As a kid, I was just so drawn to music, and I always considered myself a musician. Like I never thought of myself as anything else. And that was kind of like my dream. So, you know, obviously just playing guitar in your bedroom in high school, that kind of thing. Like that's really where it was started, or became a little more serious for me. Once I graduated, I moved to Phoenix, and I just happened to meet a bunch of metalheads, and we started a band like straight away. From there, you know, I think back on it sometimes, and it's like so long ago, I'm like, how did I make that happen? But I've always kind of been the dude in the band that spoke for the band, like the liaison between us and a manager, a label, booking, anything. And very quickly on, we started playing with all the bands we listened to, right? So that was super exciting to just be like, we're this brand new baby metal band, and we're on stage with everybody these are our gods, you know?
How did you get to play with these bands so quickly, to just go from, you know, just starting to having those opportunities so fast?
I think as the story progresses, you know, I think hindsight tells us the answer a little more. At the time, you know, it's so hard for me to remember like really doing this at that age. I think first and foremost, you know, is it comes to mindset, which I love that's, you know, part of the name of your podcast. I think in the, you know, framework that I've developed for myself, you know, over many years of just kind of fighting my way into the entertainment industry, it starts with mindset. Like you just have to believe that things that are potentially impossible are fully possible.
That's where it all starts.
Absolutely. I guess that was my mindset. I never really thought it wasn't possible. I was just like, whoever I got an email, talk to, call, write on MySpace, whatever it is, you know, make ourselves known.
Where do you think that mindset came from? What contributed to you having that mindset at such a young age?
I had a pretty rough childhood, like lots and lots of drugs, addiction, prison, jail, blah, blah, blah. Lived with, you know, 20 different people, all that kind of stuff. I think very early on, I knew as shitty as all that was, it gave me a very clear picture of what I didn't want. And so that very clear picture of what I don't want also made it pretty clear to me, like, what I do want. Right. And so I just had from a very young age, like a huge drive to like, as soon as I can, I'm leaving this town. I'm going to make new friends. I'm like all the things I'm like feel trapped as an adolescent. You know, it was like the second I was able, I was gone.
I resonate with that deeply. I had a just similar background of kind of growing up in a broken home situation in a shitty part of town where there were a lot of gangs. There was a lot of trouble. And it was really like my older sister started getting into trouble really young. And so I just was seeing everything she was doing. And I was like, well, that doesn't look fun. Like not good things are happening. So I got a very clear, it was like I was learning from what not to do. You know, and I was like, all right. And same thing. I was like, I want to get the fuck out of here the minute that I can. And for me, that was playing sports and going to college, but I totally get that, man. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, of course.
So you had this mindset, you had this very clear mindset about what you want and got the hell out of Dodge, started playing in this band, and you just, sounds like you were just relentlessly just started going for it.
Yeah, totally. These were the days of, you know, I mean, long before Spotify was a thing. Like MySpace was that was it. Like everybody's world at this time was MySpace. But MySpace was such an interesting platform. I think everybody who had it is like nostalgic for it. You know, the landscape of social media has changed a lot, but it felt like interactive. I don't know, like, you know what I mean? Like to DM some whoever now is like, good luck. They're either getting 1,000 messages or it goes to like, you know, that little almost spam folder, if you will, like the requests, whatever it is. Like it's so hard to like intentionally hit somebody up like that.
And now even within the last week, Instagram changed it so that if you DM someone that doesn't follow you, you can only send one DM and they have to like accept the invitation basically.
Right.
Because it's like, I literally just did that today and I was like trying to hit somebody up and then it wouldn't let me send the second message. I was going to invite them to be on the podcast and I sent like this little hello message and then I was going to send the podcast link and I couldn't even send it because we're not friends on Instagram yet. So,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So MySpace days, you were just DMing people?
Yeah. There's quite a handful of people that I remember meeting. They would post like logos that they were designing, right? And I would hit them up and be like, dude, your stuff's so sick. Like, I would love for you to, you know, make something for us. And then they would hit us back and be like, your band's sick. I'm down. And it was like cool, instant, like internet friendship. I don't know. It just felt like the barrier of entry was like a lot lower and you could kind of make those connections. That was it. That's really all that was around. Otherwise, you know, if you wanted your music out, there was iTunes, but it wasn't there was no DistroKid. There was no, you know, all that kind of stuff either. So you just had like some random like Pure Volume and things where you could just kind of upload it and people could sort of stream.
I haven't heard that Pure Volume in a long time, dude. I remember that. Yeah. That was my very first thing moving to LA was helping manage a metal band. This would have been like 2008 when I moved to LA and I was just like, literally didn't know anybody, but I met some dude at a barbecue that was starting like managing a band. I was like, yo, I'll be your publicist. I'll do whatever. And so, yeah, man, I remember doing just DMing people on MySpace, building MySpace followers, sending like burning CDs and shit.
Right.
Passing out free CDs at shows like Chain Reaction.
Yeah. I remember hitting up a band on MySpace and being, actually, I think that they posted something. Hey, we're kind of looking to book a show sort of in this area. And it kind of was the area we're in. And I remember writing, dude, I was probably like 15, 16 at this point. And I was like, dude, we got a space. We had a church. And it's so funny that the metal scene was like so weirdly connected to churches as venues. That was a huge thing. But anyways, I was like, I have a church. They let me do whatever. Like we could book a show there. But then they said, okay, cool. You know, we need like $200. And it's so funny because I remember being like, dude, I don't know if we could book this show like $200, like, you know, and that's like obviously a nothing ask. But when I was like 15 or 16 and it felt like, holy shit, I don't know if I could make that happen. You know, like how many kids can I get here? But it was funny. It was just such a learning experience like that.
And I love that there's really something to be said for that. Like, it's cool now that we have a lot of educational resources. There are podcasts, there's YouTube videos that are teaching people how to do shit, but there's something to be said for just going out and figuring it out on your own. Because you also can learn as much as you want intellectually and have the knowledge, but it's not until you go throw your own show that you really know how to throw a show.
Right. Totally.
Yeah.
I love
that's
that.
Cool.
I love that saying, just off what you said. The word failure and learning are almost the exact same definition, right? It's just almost a perspective. It's like your paradigm of the two things, right? It's like to go out and try, even if you fail, quote unquote. I mean, you can look at that as, well, I fucked up, or you can look at it as, cool, now I know not what to do next time. And you're just one step closer to like whatever that goal is. So I think it was just a lot of that for sure.
Yeah. I think I had that lesson ingrained in me very young as a skateboarder. It's like growing up skateboarding, you learn you're going to fail at this trick 1,000 times. And it's like 99% of it is failure. 99% of it is not landing shit. And so, but like, that's how you get good, is just to like, fail your way to success. So you start playing with bands, and then you guys started going out and touring around as well, and getting to travel a little bit and getting some of that experience.
Yeah, playing with tons of bands, becoming friends, booking shows together, local, regional, that kind of stuff. A lot of the touring, again, at that time, it's just so funny to think about these resources that we have. It just felt like where I was and where I wanted to be, there was no clear path. Like, how do you make these things happen? I also love film, and I remember sitting like watching movies and being so in awe and going like, okay, I know that they're actors or a director or whatever. How the hell do you do that? You know what I mean? Like,
What
what college do you go to get that degree to be on? You know what I mean? It's just like, obviously it doesn't work that way. But so even in music, it was just like for such a long time, we had no label, no management, no nothing. It was just like fly by the seat of your pants kind of thing. But again, that was, tons of learning experiences.
And then you became a creative director at some point. How did you get into creative directing, and what exactly does that even mean?
Long story short, so, basically from 18 to 22 years old for 5 years, only focused on music. And like I said, I only really considered myself a musician. Like, I didn't think of myself as an artist or anything beyond I'm a musician, I play music. Our manager, much later on, he was from New Zealand. So I had heard about New Zealand a lot of times through conversation. And when the band finally broke up, I was basically like, dude, I put so much time into this. I'm not going to start another band tomorrow. I just need like a breath of fresh air. So I moved to New Zealand, like sold everything, packed up with no intention of really coming back. I don't really know what the next step was, except for I'm going to New Zealand. I did know that, once I get to New Zealand, I'm also not going to try to find a bunch of dudes and start a band there. So my fallback and my second interest was always film. And I remember, it was an interesting time too, where, this is kind of moving forward a bit, where YouTube is a bit more available, the internet, blah, blah, blah. So I remember learning the movie Black Swan, which won an Academy Award. I remember reading that they were shooting a lot of that movie on a DSLR because it was kind of run and gun. They didn't always have permits in, I think it was New York. And I remember being like, dude, that movie's so badass. They shot this on like a camera that's, $500 or whatever. So I bought one. I started learning it. And then this is like, as the transition to going to New Zealand, a really like pivotal moment in my life was 2 days after I lived in New Zealand. I was living in a hostel, like right downtown in Auckland. I walked out of the hostel and right in front was a film crew. So I remember just kind of standing back for long enough to kind of figure out, okay, who's in charge here? And as soon as I kind of felt like I knew who was, they ended up taking a break. And I walked up to that guy and I was like, hey, dude, this is what I want to be doing. I moved here 2 days ago. Here's my number.
Yes.
Let me know if I can help in any way. Lo and behold, this dude owns a big production company calls me a week later, and he's like, "Hey man, we have an Xbox commercial." The campaign was basically this like 24-hour release around the world, starting from like the first time zone, which was New Zealand, and then going all the way around the world and then ending in LA. So we had this huge event shooting this commercial. We dropped one to like the bottom of an aquarium with sharks in it and stuff. I did all this stuff. But anyways, this dude literally just called me and said, "Hey man, like, love to have you on. We'll have you as a camera assistant."
I got to pause that right there because that is exactly how I got my break in LA and getting hired at Capitol Records as well. Was
Dude,
my friend got me in the door. She worked for a PR company that was putting on like a press release at the House of Blues, and she was like, "Hey," she's like, "if you want to come at 5 a.m. and like set up chairs and volunteer, like I can just get you in the room." And while I was there, somebody pointed out a woman. They're like, "Oh, that woman like is a big executive at Capitol Records." And I was like, "That's all I need to know." I literally beelined it straight across the room and just walked up to this lady. I was like, "Hey, what's up? I'm Nick and I'm trying to get a job," and shook her hand. And it was like her assistant had just put in her 2 weeks that day or the day before. And I just like walked right into it. So lesson learned right there. Shoot your fucking shot. Don't wait. Like you have nothing to lose. Like you never know if you're cool and you're humble and just graceful about it. But I don't know, man, shoot your shot. I will always vouch for that. Cause like, imagine if that didn't happen, like think about where your life would be, you know?
Oh,
like,
totally.
It was such a massively pivotal moment for both of us.
Yeah, absolutely. We kind of talked about mindset a little bit, and that's a part of it. You know, another thing I remember at the time thinking like, all right, I basically, you know, I know the ins and outs of a camera, like in terms of how they work, f-stops and ISO and frame rates and this kind of stuff. So I was like, I don't know what job he's basically offering me. But if he called and he was like, "All right, dude, we're shooting like 3D green screen IMAX," I would have been like, "I'm sorry, I'm not your guy." I'm happy to go out of my comfort zone, and I don't advocate lying, but I think to some degree, stretching a little bit of the truth to get your foot in the door. And it's not lying, but just like the self confidence of, I know I can do it, right? I'll figure this shit out, and I'm taking the opportunity. So luckily it was within that kind of space where I said yes. And then, you know, I did a great job. Everybody loved working with me. And it was probably like, you know, a week or two later. And the next job I was doing a commercial for L'Oreal.
Fuck yeah, dude. I love that, man. I love it. Like there's so many opportunities out there, dude. You just got to put yourself in the room.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about the agency then. You did the creative directing stuff. You got your hands on some camera work. Now, tell me about Good Things Social, how you started that, and what it is exactly that you guys do over there.
Really, it came out of necessity, right? I was in management. I had a few artists that I was working with. COVID basically hit, and so many of our plans obviously kind of ended with that. But in the beginning, I remember thinking, okay, if we can't leave our house, you know, shows and tours are canceled, all this kind of stuff, how do we still reach people? How do we connect? Right. And the obvious answer was the internet. And so I'm like a super hands-on person. You know, I've had a lot of like technical experience throughout all of this. So I was like, man, I just need to figure out how to do ads and, you know, social media management. I need to figure this kind of stuff out. So that way my artists can kind of like be ahead of the curve, right? Because we're stuck, we're going to be stuck here for a while.
What kind of artists were you managing? Were you managing bands?
Yeah, they were bands kind of in the like alt pop sphere, you know, still like real music, drums, guitar, vocal, all that kind of stuff, but a little more pop centric. I was living in LA at the time, and that's like a lot of what was around at the time.
Cool. You're like, I got to just learn. I got to roll up my sleeves and learn some of these skills here.
Totally. Yeah. And it's, dude, maybe I owe like a lot of my success to MySpace, because a bit of this, like, you know, the technical side of computers, if you remember on the back end of MySpace, there was like an HTML box, and you could go in and basically edit, you know, how your like MySpace page looked.
Yeah.
So from there, I was like, I remember just seeing somebody's profile and being like, whoa, how did they make it look like that? And then I was like, committed to figuring it out, kind of lent itself to me feeling like confident in, a technical sense with computers. So when I got into marketing, ad platforms and that kind of stuff, it didn't feel that foreign.
So you were doing like Facebook ads, Google ads as well. Like, I don't know anything about advertising. So what are the actual ad platforms that you were using and learning?
I mean, there's quite a few. Obviously, it's not just used for music, but the agency that I have now, we're only focused on the music industry, right? So every service we have is a service that's dedicated to a need, a musician or an artist would have, right? So
yeah,
primarily we use Google. Google obviously owns YouTube, so Google Ads platform, is how we funnel things to YouTube. That's primarily music videos. Facebook is obviously a huge one. Facebook and Instagram, it's the same ad platform, and you can kind of just pick where you want things to go. We leverage that a lot for like tour ads, right? If we're trying to sell tickets, for example, merch is another big one. TikTok's kind of the new thing right now. That ad platform, we've seen a lot of success on it. I think YouTube and TikTok are my favorites right now. And there's various reasons for that.
Let's get into the weeds a little bit, because I'd love to get like a advertising 101 tutorial, right? Let's talk about my podcast, right? I am trying to drive traffic to Spotify, kind of my main place that I think most people are listening. So if I wanted to drive more people to Spotify, which any artist out there probably wants to build their Spotify followers, or say they're putting out a track, same thing, same platform. What would be the best way for me to go about running ads and driving traffic over there? Give me some strategy here.
I would say first and foremost, what's your budget, right? Because that's going to dictate a lot of how I would approach strategy. If you have a massive budget, I would say hit it everywhere, go hard, just like build that brand awareness.
Like spread it out over TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, just hit every single one of them.
All of it. Yep. Anything and everything.
Okay.
Whereas if you had a limited budget, I would say we need to be a bit more strategic. Where is your audience right now, right? Is it primarily on Instagram? Is that where you're seeing the most engagement? Then maybe we double down there. With a small budget, if you still tried to hit everywhere, I mean, the effectiveness of spending $50 in 10 different places is going to be very, very minimal. Where, spending $500 in one place, you can start to actually see some momentum with that.
Okay. So what are some like do's and don'ts? Because Instagram does make it pretty easy to, I suppose the first sort of difference is creating an actual ad versus boosting like a post that's already there. What would you say? Let's just use myself, for example. I could boost a reel, or I could create a ad like of my own. Which do you think would be more effective?
Well, using the ad platforms, like a million times more effective. Boosting a post is like a massively watered down version of what we do. It's a bit like dummy proof, for lack of a better word.
And I feel like that because they make it really easy to do that. So I feel like that's what a lot of artists kind of just go to, is like, oh, I'll just boost my post. Like you said, it's kind of the low hanging fruit. It's the easy way to do it, but also probably the less effective, because sometimes people are like, I don't know who this person is or what they're talking about, or it's not very strategic. So creating your own ad that is an actual intentionally created piece of advertisement is probably the better way to go.
We're talking about two different things, right? So hitting a boost button versus using an ad platform, which is kind of one thing, whereas you're almost touching more on like what we would call the creative, right? The thing that you're actually going to be running, whether it be a photo or a video that you're putting in front of people. That's something entirely different. Right now, the landscape of everything changes over time, right? So let's say 5 years ago, it wasn't entirely uncommon that, an artist would shoot a music video, take like a bunch of cool clips from it, right? String it together in like a 15-second mini reel. And then over the top, say song X out now, swipe up, stream it. You have a few platform icons down on the bottom. And at the time, that was just kind of commonplace and they were relatively effective at that time. Now it's like everybody has ad blinders on, right? It's like the second you see an ad, you just know to swipe, like, get out of here. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You have marketing fatigue, right? We're getting marketed to all the time. So our brain is automatically tuning it out and skipping over it. Very good point.
Totally. The way around that we've learned to still be effective is you really want to make content that you can still run as an ad, right? The underlying intention is that you're still kind of promoting something. Generally, in this instance, it would be like a song. But you want to make the content in a way that it feels like, imagine just going on to like your explore feed, right? Or like scrolling on TikTok and the content that just pops up and it feels so organic and native to the platform that you don't realize you're being advertised to. In that regard, we don't put headlines, we don't put descriptions, we don't put buttons, nothing. Because if you do that, what ends up happening is you can, through paid promotion, make that ad, which feels very organic, end up in front of a lot of people who then think that it's organic. And then they start to engage with it, right? Because it's not like, I'm not saying engage with me, right? Making that super obvious. It's like everybody wants freedom of choice, right? Like, oh, that was interesting.
Yeah.
Don't tell me what to do. Exactly.
Don't tell me to engage with you, even if I like it. Now I'm not going to because you told me to.
Exactly. Right. So we take all of that out of the equation, which then, increases engagement.
So for me, what I'm thinking is if I was going to run an ad, because I was thinking about just sort of filming myself and making an ad and being like, hey, if you are an up and coming artist and you want to learn about the music industry, listen to the Headliner Mindset, right? And kind of making an actual ad. From what I'm gathering, it sounds like it would be way more effective to just take a clip of the podcast and as I put on my reels, but just run that as the content through an ad platform.
100%.
Just like I would through my page.
Exactly. Take one of those that you've cut into like a vertical reel, pick one that right out of the gate, like in the first second, I'm already learning something. I'm like, you're adding value, right? That for sure is going to be the most effective. And then the next step is really, who are you putting that in front of, right? Because you could just leave everything open-ended, then it's going to, the ad platform will say, you're going to reach 2 billion people
that don't give a shit about you.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So next step is really starting to identify like, all right, well, who's going to care about this? Like, where is that value being useful, to who?
Yeah. So before we get into the targeting, can you give us an example of one of your clients, like a case study that created a really good piece of content to advertise? Like, what would be a good example or an idea that an artist could use for that type of organic feeling advertisement?
This was maybe, I don't know, close to a year ago. We had an artist who, and this kind of became a bit of a trend. I don't know that this would be as effective like right now, but at the time it definitely was. She basically put her phone she was in her car, put her phone like in the center of the dashboard, facing this way, right? She had written a song that it was kind of like about her family, like her mom and her dad, something like that. Some story that like was heartfelt that she knew, that her family also knew. So in the car, you have her in the driver's seat, her mom's in the passenger seat, and her dad's like in the back seat, kind of right in the center. So you could see from this frame, you could see all three of them. So she basically just like leans in, pushes play like on the stereo. The song starts playing, and the only text on the screen is the lyrics that are coming up, which is like, kind of allowing us to understand the story a bit better.
Yeah.
Pretty quickly her mom starts to cry, and you can see her like becoming more and more emotional. The dad's, sort of holding out, which is like, we've all experienced that dichotomy, right? But over time, all of a sudden, like, the dad starts getting emotional, like, something hits him, he starts crying, then they're all crying. And you're like, yeah, it's just captivating. It's interesting. Like, I'm not being
It's
told to
real.
watch this. It's real. Right.
Yeah.
So we ran that as an ad, right? She already had it posted on her feed. So it's posted organic. Then we took it, put it onto the ad platform. We ran it as an ad. What ends up happening is that a bunch of the kind of paid engagement starts to build up really quickly, obviously, because we're paying for it. But, all of these ad platforms have like algorithms and metrics that they're kind of looking for, like success metrics. So let's say, how long did the viewer watch this video? Did they watch, 100% of it? And did the majority watch 100%? Did the majority comment, like, save, those sorts of things? As that's happening, like if we're effectively hitting the right people and it's an ad that feels like that, it's this organic nature, the paid media will start to coincide with the organic boost that will also algorithmically start happening, because now we're reaching this big audience and they actually care about it. So then TikTok or whatever it is goes, cool, well, let's keep that going. How can we add more fuel to the fire? And so what you'll end up seeing, or what we'll end up seeing, is like, let's say the video gets to, or the TikTok gets to like 2 million views, 1 million of that we paid for, but the other 1 million views was free. That was like the organic nature that started happening over time.
You're saying it would get 2 million views, but isn't it two different pieces of content? Isn't one of them running through the ad platform separately, and then there's the organic post, or it's all driving traffic to the same location?
Super good question. There's two different ways that you can run ads, what we call dark ads, right? So let's say a band's going to go on tour. They have a bunch of tour promotion videos. They don't want to fill up their feed with all this promo stuff, right?
Yeah.
So what they do is they give that to us. They email us, give us like a link to download all of this. We download it. We re-upload it specifically to the ad platform. Now we can still run that, but it's not on their feed, right? So that's called a dark ad. I mean, it can be an aesthetic reason. Yeah, there's a few different reasons why you might want to do that.
Well, especially in the case of a tour, those are only going to be applicable to like the certain demographics. I imagine you're running those videos just to particular geographic locations, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah. Sure. And exactly. And that could be a reason to do that. But here's the downside to dark ads. All of the engagement, right? Let's say you see that ad, you might see that there's engagement on it, but that engagement isn't actually getting saved to anything. It's getting saved to an ID. But as soon as you turn that ad off or it's not running anymore, that all goes away, right? Whereas if you put that on your feed and we ran it and it had 2 million views on it, that's going to stay forever. So now when people go look at your page, they're like, wow, that video was obviously popular. I want to check it out too, So
in what instances would you run dark ads? Besides, if like, I see how it would make sense if you're just running even the same ad to different locations, it's a tour thing, but what would be another example of why you would run it as a dark ad versus a normal ad?
Yeah, touring is a big one. I think merch could also be that. Let's say you have a well-curated feed. It has some certain like color palette, or it's like primarily live concert footage, and you don't want to dump like a merch ad that's just like a bunch of pictures of t-shirts and stickers and stuff, right?
Yeah.
But you still want your fans to know that you have this new merch. Okay, cool. Well, let's just run that as a dark ad so it doesn't have to go on your feed, and then you could post it and then delete it later or whatever, right? So it's just being more intentional with, I don't know, I guess how you just want those things to happen.
So what's the difference between just boosting a post then versus running it as an ad?
One, the option of kind of how granular you can get on the ad platform itself, right? Like really segregating age ranges, gender, locations, targeting interests, like all of these things. I mean, you can make a lot of layers to it. Another, this is like a massive piece of what we do, and a huge amount of people, especially if they're doing it on their own, are probably missing out on, is we hear the word data all the time, right? We're trying to collect data, learn about our audience, that sort of thing. Well, if you don't have your audiences set up on the back end, right? And basically you go deep into your settings of these ad platforms, remarketing and audiences and lookalikes and all these different things. You have to manually go set those things up. And you do that before you're even running an ad. And then when you run the ad, you're kind of dictating where does that information, the data that's being collected, where's it going to go and be stored over time, right? So if you didn't do this and you ran an ad, right, even if you reached millions of people, you might go, oh, cool. Well, the platform's understanding who likes what and who's here and all those sorts of things. But again, if you don't have that information being stored somewhere, as soon as you turn that ad off, that stuff's gone. Like all the money you spent to collect the data is out the window.
And so what is that data that people can potentially be storing, and why would they want to store it? And also, how do you store it?
It'd be easier to explain if we were hypothetically talking about an artist literally starting from zero across the board. So this artist currently has no fans, no nothing. You properly get all this stuff set up, and I could talk about that a little later on. But let's say you have it all set up. As you start to gain fans, these fans, we don't collect, as a digital marketer, we don't know your name, right? We don't actually have your name. We don't actually see your address or anything like that. That part is basically stored to like an ID that's attached to you because of your profile, blah, 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 right? Facebook or Instagram or Google, they know that information. And so that information through basically like strings of code is now being stored into these audience segments that we've set up on the back end. So let's say you start from zero, you've been running ads for a while. Now you have 10,000 fans, right? If you didn't do this, and let's say you were going to go on tour, for example, the reality is it is very unlikely that somebody who does not know who you are and does not know your music is going to see your ad and then go, I want to spend $20 and go to this concert. It's not going to happen, right?
Yeah, you'd want to be targeting specifically the people that have already shown interest in you.
Exactly.
Right?
Hence the word re-engagement or remarketing. We're re-engaging or remarketing to the audience that already engages with you. So now it's not that hard sell, right? It's not like cold marketing, it's warm marketing or even hot marketing. And you'll now have a reason, an intention of, again, how you want to start separating things out. So let's say this artist now has 10,000 fans and they want to promote their newest single. If they want to promote their newest single, right, and they have 10,000 fans, well, you definitely want your 2,000 or 10,000 fans that already dig who you are. You want them to know that you're putting out this new song. So that would be a particular campaign that we would set up, right? Hey, let's make sure the 10,000 see that you have new music out. But you also want to grow at the same time. So we're not going to just make one campaign. We're going to make a whole bunch of campaigns. And so that's just one segment. And there's a bunch of different segments that are now also doing different jobs, if you will.
Like even, segmenting the different locations. If you're going to do a tour, you could hit your 10,000 fans and different areas of the country. That all makes perfect sense. Very cool. That's why we would want to set up the back end, save this information, store this information.
Now we're just, this is like the tip of the iceberg of why this is so much more effective and important, and why, I would never hit a boost button, basically.
I know a lot of people are very focused on wanting to just really just build their followers, and they're not necessarily like, let's just start there. If someone really just wanted to get to that 10,000 follower mark, what would be a good strategy for them to do that? What would be like the fastest way to get to 10K?
I have this conversation with artists a lot. One, I think, what is the platform that like is best suited to you? So for example, 5 years ago, you would take a music video, you'd chop it up, turn it vertical, right? And that was your ad. And that wouldn't be effective today. Those artists, I will tell them when, they sign on, like, hey, this is not going to work. Like, let me give you a bunch of examples and references of like things that we know work. And they'll basically say, I don't give a shit. I don't want to make a TikTok video. I'm not interested in all this. In that regard, it's like, okay, well, their music video is really cool, right? It's like super well done, awesome cinematography, story, the song is really cool. If that's kind of your outlook on social media, then maybe for you, let's not put marketing dollars into Instagram or TikTok or whatever, and let's focus on YouTube because you liked the music video part of it and you're cool to make those all day long. So let's grow your YouTube because at least you can give us content that, is like genuine or heartfelt or, whatever that is.
And so would you say that on like say TikTok or Instagram, more like being in it yourself, like having it maybe be more personal as an artist as opposed to the music video direction is the way to go?
Oh, for sure. I mean, again, the landscape changing idea, right? I mean, Instagram used to be for photos. Photos are obviously nowhere near as effective as a video. You can run them side by side. I would say 9 times out of 10, your video is going to win over your photo will. So for sure, focusing on video. That being said, even within a video, it knows, these platforms know when a face is in the video, and the more kind of clear, focus centered that face is, generally speaking, it's going to kind of grab onto that and sort of push it a little bit more versus.
Really?
Oh yeah. I mean, like think about, you could run like carousels, right? Like a series of, swipeable photos. Look for ones where the first photo is like somebody's face. And then the next one is like a meme or, some text or something like that. And then do the same thing, but do it the opposite, right? I just wrote a whole bunch of text. You're going to see, it depends on obviously the audience size, but you'll see hundreds of likes on the one that has a face, and you're going to see 10 likes on the one that's just a square of text, Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. And that is because it does actually recognize the difference between, content. Like what actually is this content?
I would assume though that that's just because the people that are swiping are way more likely to click like on a photo of a person that they know or that they like versus if they see text, they're going to probably just scroll by it and not be interested in it.
For sure. It's multifaceted. Like, don't get me wrong. This isn't the only answer, but kind of like the saying, like, you just got to stack as many cards as you possibly can in your favor. Right. So what are people engaging with, what's popular, what's trending, what is the algorithm looking for? It's a combination of all these ideas, but some of them are pretty general, like standard practice at this point, and faces and videos is definitely a part of that.
Yeah. What would you recommend as resources for somebody that really wanted to learn more about this stuff? Because I think every artist that's out there needs to know this stuff, at least how to run their own social media. I think, hiring an agency like yours or working with somebody like you would be a benefit to investing in the advertising side, just so they know how to spend their money appropriately. But of course, everybody also needs to know how to run their own account, and that is a big main marketing tool. What would you recommend? Do you have any resources for people that just want to learn more about this, really like learn it and study it and get good at it?
I have two thoughts on that. One, just to quickly answer your question, I think, YouTube is one of the best free resource. You could learn anything on YouTube.
Yeah. YouTube University, baby.
100%. Yeah. It's such a good platform, and there's tons of experts, people. You kind of obviously, if you stick with a topic for long enough, you'll start to kind of figure out, like, over time, who really knows what they're talking about and who might not. You're kind of starting in the middle at first. But yeah, so I think YouTube's a great place to start. That being said, it kind of plays into this other idea that I have. We talked about mindset. The next part of what I believe a musician, or really anybody in the entertainment industry, needs to nail down is the idea of business. The reason why I bring that up is this is obviously a relatively small part of music business, digital marketing. But if I'm the musician, right, I've spent all my time either being an amazing guitar player, drummer, singer, producer, whatever I am. More than likely, I don't have the desire to now spend hundreds of hours learning how to use ad platforms, right? It would probably be in my best interest to go out and hire somebody who's already invested those hundreds or thousands of hours. This idea of business, it's super important to at least understand the scope of business, right? You don't have to know all the ins and outs that I do, but you do need to know kind of the general idea of, like, well, why is this important? Why do I need this? Like, what aspects of this is it in my favor to understand? So that way, if I'm having a conversation, I can navigate it appropriately. Because if you don't, I think this goes way beyond digital marketing. But for example, in digital marketing, there's a term that gets used, which is vanity metrics, right?
Yeah.
There are agencies where, you'll pay them and say, run my ads. At the end of your campaign, say 30 days, they go, well, here you go. We spent all your money. We reached 1 million people. And you're like, okay, cool. I guess, we reached 1 million people. The reality is, it's like, okay, well, let's say they did reach 1 million people. Where were you at point A, right? Your starting point, like before you worked with this agency, like what were all your numbers across the board on social media, Spotify, whatever, right? What were all those? And then after them saying that they reached 1 million people, what are they now? Because my job is not to just reach 1 million people, right? That can be entirely ineffective. Like, your numbers might be exactly the same at the end of that campaign. You're really paying me for growth, right? To, like, try to continue reaching a new audience. A new audience, or at least your pre-existing audience, and making sure that they're aware of whatever it is that you're doing at any given time. If you don't understand these things, right, then it's pretty damn easy for me to just kind of convince you that we did a good job and you would not know any different, right?
I love that, man. A couple of big points there. Thinking like a business owner. I mean, I'm very much in that space right now where I've just been coaching and doing it because I fucking love it, and it brings me joy, and it's my passion, it's my purpose. And it's only been kind of in this last year that I'm like, wait a minute, I really want to build a business around this, right? And one of those reasons is that I can serve more people, the bigger the business I have. But really stepping into this business owner mindset also means that I can't do everything by myself. Like, there's just so much to do that I have to start outsourcing, right? I need to start hiring other people and actually really building a team.
Right.
And so you bring up a really good point of, your job as an artist is number one, first and foremost, to make the art, to create the product. And then at some point, you really got to start thinking like a business owner, start building out that team. And it's hard. It's kind of like the catch-22, because in the beginning, you really do have to do it all yourself, right? That's this real interesting sticking point is, when do you start hiring other people? When do you start building out a team? I think this is where having a budget is so important. Like, if you're working a 9-to-5, like, save your fucking money, right? I talked about this 2 episodes ago with Dylan Nathaniel, but like, start saving your money so that you can start investing and hiring other people, because it is an investment. If you spend X amount of dollars in this area, then you also should be looking at getting more than X amount of dollars back.
Right.
And really thinking about that from that business perspective, like what is the value of your time? Like you said, you know, you might not have 100 hours to sit there and learn all of these things yourself, nor is it really going to be worth your time. Somebody else that's already spent years learning it can maybe do it in a fraction of the time, and it might be worth paying them to do it instead, so you can focus on the other aspects of your art or of running the business. I mean, I'm very much going through that myself. I'm still oftentimes, I finally just had somebody edit my podcast for the first time, but it's like, I can't spend all this time just doing social media. I need to be coaching. I need to be having conversations. I need to be focusing on other parts of the business. So I'm glad that you brought that up. We talked about that in the episode with Freddie Lane. She's a very, very smart, business-minded woman who's been able to accelerate the growth of her project very, very quickly because she already ran a business for 10 years, and she knew, like, oh, I immediately from day one, I'm going to hire other people to do things for me because that's just how you run a business. So yeah, really important point that you make there. I do want to ask though, you know, just speaking of hiring businesses, like you also do outside of the agency, you do coaching as well too. Like you're starting to kind of coach people also. I know we briefly talked about this, but tell me about what you're doing in the coaching space.
I look at it a little bit more like a mentorship, you know, I guess coaching and mentor, you know, it's somewhat interchangeable, but my intention with this is that, you know, I started from literally nothing. I did not know what I was doing. And now it's been, you know, almost 15 years of me I've almost never really had like a real quote unquote real job. Like I've just been a creative in some capacity my whole adult life. So, you know, again, like that point A, point B kind of idea, it's like there are so many artists. It's just like a shortcut, right? You know, it's like you can now learn from a mentor who's dealt with all the stuff you're dealing with. And instead of like spending the next 15 years trying to figure it all out, you can now basically access that information.
Yep.
And that's really like my goal, my intention. And, you know, of course there's YouTube and all these sorts of things, but experience is still going to trump all of that. And it's kind of like a thing where, you know, sure, the information might be out there, but you almost don't even know what to look for yet, right? Because you haven't even come across problems that you're going to come across. So it's like, you can't really get ahead of it because you don't even know what it really is.
Yeah. It's like, what does they call it? Like unconscious competence or something.
Right.
It's like,
right.
you're not even aware of unconscious incompetence.
Right.
You're not even aware. You don't know what you don't know.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. I've really built out this framework, if you will, that I, you know, in hindsight now doing lots and lots of different things. How did I do it? And how did I do it so fast? I think that's the thing. When people talk to me, it's like, that's, I think, where they're like most interested. Even people who are, you know, they're super creative. They've also done really amazing things, but it's a bit like, I don't know. I've had like probably 3 or 4 or 5 different, like relatively successful creative careers now, working with, you know, all the top brands or like with huge artists. You know, even when you mention Capitol Records, it's funny because I like to say I worked there for 5 minutes. This was like a almost COVID kind of thing as well, where they were looking for a creative director and sort of like the process of how I made that happen. But yeah, basically the framework is kind of like mindset, understanding mindset, developing your mindset, right? Which I know you're great at. And that's definitely a huge focus of yours, but also understanding the business, right? Like what is it that I'm actually getting into? And obviously we just talked a bit about like why that's important with digital marketing, but eventually you're going to start running into managers, publishers, labels, booking agents. I mean, you know what I mean? The list is endless. And how are you going to know how to navigate all of those conversations, right? Imagine the 100 hours you have to spend to kind of get a grasp on digital marketing. You have to spend all that time on all of these different things. But beyond that, you know, how you can kind of leverage your business knowledge for connection. You know, I think connection comes next. The reason being is like, you know, let's say you met somebody is well connected randomly, I don't know, coffee shop or something. The reality is like, you can walk up to him like I did in New Zealand and say, hey, I love what you do. I'm trying to do the same thing. Okay, great. Good luck. Right. The reality is, if you understand the business, it's like something that they can recognize, right? It's like you're kind of on different frequencies, so to speak. And it's like, it's very aware for somebody who's on a frequency way up here to recognize that you're on a frequency way down here.
It's like learning how to speak another language. You know, I remember when I was teaching music business at Icon Collective, and I would do like the record label contract lesson, and we would take a real record label contract and we would walk through it. It's like learning Chinese. If you don't know what that shit means, it's completely foreign.
Totally.
So if you don't have the knowledge, you can't speak the language, then it's like trying to talk to a foreigner that it speaks a different language. You're like, no, we're not on the same page here, right? So having that level, that really, really deep understanding of what you're getting yourself into. I remembered the other thing I was gonna bring up as well was the importance of also monetizing. Back to the idea of like just building the numbers for the sake of building numbers. Everybody wants to have 10,000 followers, or everyone wants to have 100,000 followers, but the numbers that matter are the numbers that are in your bank account. Are you actually making money? Right? Because you can go build a bunch of followers and have all these vanity metrics, but how are you running your actual business? How are those fans actually turning into a revenue stream that is allowing you to support yourself to be able to keep creating art and running your business? That's another big piece of the puzzle that you've got to understand. But I might be, one of your, I might have to be maybe not a coaching client, but I think an agency client. So you can help me blow this fucking podcast up and get it out there into the world. But even just I know we spent the first 20 minutes talking about MySpace, but in the last, 40 minutes, I have learned a shit ton about advertising. A lot of things I didn't know. Is super insightful. I mean, we could definitely go down the rabbit hole for 2 more hours about all of this. But if anybody is interested in working with Aaron, either on the agency side at Good Things Social or just personally, obviously this guy has a wealth of wisdom, a wealth of knowledge, has a lot of great things to offer. I will put his contact information in the show notes. So be sure to reach out to him and hit him up. And if you like this episode, I've never even said this before. It's been almost 20 episodes. Yeah. Please give it a like, share it with your friends, leave a comment, pass it along to somebody that you think might benefit from hearing this conversation. Aaron, I really, really appreciate you taking the time today to come through and let me pick your brain and just, be an open book to share everything that you know. I also know that that was only probably 2% of what's actually in there. So we might have to do a couple more episodes in the future. I'm going to have you back.
Yeah, dude, please do. I love talking about this stuff. I love teaching, and I think that that's a bit of the mentorship thing too, is just, it gives me an outlet for all of this stuff. It's like, I hate that all of this is just stored up here and it's, not being, taken advantage of in some way. But dude, seriously, thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate you so much. I'm very glad we met. I'm also very glad that I just have another metalhead friend in my network, because there's not a whole lot of us, but
I know we're out here.
Yeah.
But yes, brother, it's great to chat with you. I'm serious though. Let's do another one of these. We'll do a round 2 at some point and keep exploring this very deep topic of marketing. So thanks again for your time, man. And I can't wait to see you soon.
Absolutely. Thank you, dude.